All right. Hello, and welcome to From Ground to Great, a business, aviation, and personal growth podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Ruiz Jimenez, and today I'm here with Buzz Kraft. How are you doing today?
Doing really well, Daniel. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, I'm super excited for you to come on today. I haven't had a lot of aviation guests in a while since coming back to California. There's way more aviation people in Florida just because it's like the number one place for flight training.
Yeah, of course. I mean, especially in your kind of corner in the aviation world, it's like that's where commerce happens, and that's where the beautiful weather is, and therefore everything about getting on a plane, whether you're a person or a package, happens right where.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's like it's really nice weather, but also the hurricanes that come in and all. It's pretty hectic too. Like there's gonna be some hectic parts to fly.
Take, man, so like if it's beautiful weather most of the time, you're gonna have to deal with extreme weather challenges the other time. So not a surprise at all.
Yeah, I remember I started my flight training here in California, in Davis, California, and I actually finished my check ride and did my check ride in Florida, and I feel like the level of like margin in aviation was just way more stricter than it was in California when I moved, and this is what I mean. So there's, of course, we were saying that it's like the number one place for flight training. What is that going to mean? The more flight training, the more airplanes that there are, there's going to be more airspaces that you can possibly bust. And so having to maneuver a lot of Bravo airspaces was like a very fine line. And here in California, it was like pretty open space. I didn't have to worry too much about, busting any airspace. I could just fly, talk to approach, and just have a good time, And then once I moved there, I was like, I need to get ForeFlight. I can't do charts. I can't do paper and charts anymore.
You have lived the perfect example of somebody who wants to be like the homegrown, start to finish civilian pilot, because you got to experience both of those worlds, man. You got to be like, okay, I got open space. I can work more on the grassroots, seat of the pants, flight maneuvering, that sort of thing. But if you want to be in aviation beyond just being a recreational or private pilot, you need to understand airspace. You need to understand how to work with the flow, work yourself into every other scale of aviation to include business aviation, commercial aviation, big commercial aviation. So that's where it's at. And I'm really glad you got to experience both coasts, which is pretty phenomenal. Most people who are doing this from, ground zero moving up don't ever get to do it early in their journeys on both coasts like you're doing. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like I would have missed out. And I'm sure it's way different in like very mountainous terrain, because we have.
Oh yeah, you got the middle.
Yeah.
You got West Coast, East Coast. Yeah, you got pretty sea level, flat, mostly, right? But then there's a middle part.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then that's when you're gonna having to focus more on like, okay, can we actually climb to our altitude today?
Right.
Yeah. Can we pass the mountains?
You gotta get that flight engineer kind of mode, right?
Yeah.
Or meteorologist meets pilot mode. For sure.
Yeah, I saw this post online where it was like, I wanted to be a pilot, but I never knew I had to be a lawyer and a meteorologist and all this. And it's like, it encompasses so many aspects. Oh, and also just like personal assessment and just making sure that you're okay when you're flying. And it's so much that encompasses aviation. And I really want to ask you how you got started, but I want to let our listeners know how we met. So it's a good story. I was practicing for my written exam for my private pilot, and I was taking classes my senior year at Sac City, and I was in the library, and I had all my books out for aviation, studying, and Mr. Kraft, he substitutes sometimes at Davis High and other schools here in Davis, And he comes over and he's like, he looks at all the books that I have and he's like, that looks familiar. Nothing said after that. He's like, I'll come back.
Keep it mysterious.
Yeah, exactly. It was mysterious. Yeah, that is true. You had a
to
class.
walk around,
Yeah.
See if people were actually doing work.
Yeah.
Not gaming while supposed to do work.
Yeah, but yeah, it was funny. And then you walk around and you throw your ATP license on the on the table. And I'm like, whoa! Oh my God, he's a pilot. Yeah. I liked it. No, I liked it. Yeah.
You know, when you deal with other aviators, you can kind of get away with that certain kind of like forward, cocky statement, I think. But you know, I honestly, I think that the pilot persona that the non-flying public has isn't always totally positive. You know, they always think about the big head, the big ego stuff. So I really try to stay conscious of that and try to kind of mitigate it. It's like, you know, well, if you see somebody else that's super into flying, just push the throttles forward, basically.
Yeah,
you know, pun intended.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was really great to see, find example of you know, a young person who's looking at aviation, and it's such an important part of our future as a whole, as our economy, as our society. And we're just kind of chatting about this before our session here. Aviation as an integral part of us as human beings is not going away. You know, we kind of fantasize about how, well, we'll just we'll take spacecraft everywhere, or we'll just do everything where we are sitting as humans and just go full AI, remote, and then we don't need airplanes for anything. It's like, well, that's not reality. If humans are always going to want to travel. They're always going to want to get their own human body from point A to point B. And beyond that, they're going to want to get 10, 100 times beyond their human body of goods that they need via air, because they need them right away. You know,
Yeah.
They need it more right away than ever now. So aviation is absolutely not just here to stay, but it's growing so rapidly that we can't keep up. You know, because news about pilot shortages, can't keep up on production of aircraft. And sure, there's going to be a lot of pilot-less remote aviation platforms out there, but it's all about understanding how to negotiate the air and get from point A to point B and do it safely. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity still. Maybe, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago when I was first getting into it, I was like, well, I want to take advantage of this now because I don't know how long it's going to last. I really had that kind of maybe science fiction take on it. Like, I don't know, maybe pilots will be gone by the time I'm an older adult. And then turns out the opposite is true. You know, it's like we need more pilots than ever, and therefore we need more maintainers and we need aircraft designers. And so it's a perfect time to be alive if you're into aviation or the business of aviation.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things that I want to touch on just from you saying all that. That's why I'm so excited for you to be here today, because I'm like, oh, it's been so long, so I can talk aviation with someone. It's definitely been a while. So we were definitely talking about how just aviation is rapidly growing, and I had someone on the podcast before. He was a flight instructor. His name is Mike Thompson. And he was saying, if you're not learning, you're not flying. Like you have to catch up. And there's constantly, because there's like what you're saying, we're in a career where it's just constantly growing. And with growth, there just has to be constant learning and constant catching up. And if you're not catching up, you're behind. Which I think is so cool. Because, I mean, that just doesn't apply to aviation. It just applies to, I'm sure it applies to many other fields as well. And in life, especially. You have to be constantly being a student and be in a humbling position where you know that maybe now you feel like you know something, but that doesn't mean that you won't be able to hang later on, you know, because it's just rapidly changing. I was at Oshkosh. and I was able to talk. Oh, in Oshkosh, for people that don't know, it's like the biggest small general aviation event in the world. So many people come and fly in their small airplanes and land there, and it's like in the middle of nowhere.
In Wisconsin.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, which is the middle of nowhere too.
Cheese and airplanes, that's like the thing.
Yes, cheese curds was huge. Yeah, cheese curds were huge there, man. That was like my diet there, pretty much. That's what I.
It's pretty close to Canada. Maybe that's why cheese curds are big up there.
Yeah, it was huge. But I talked to these guys from NASA, and they were talking about how they had a separate department where they're figuring out, and they're working with the FAA too on we're having cars that are able to fly now, and the airspace is going to look insane because of that. And so they're trying right now to figure out how can we accommodate airspace for people that are going to start flying in cars that can that can fly now. And and oh, we should say we're at Sunwork right now.
Quick plug.
Yeah. Quick plug. Thank you. Shout out to the Sunwork Brewing Company here in Davis. Mr. Kraft, he does a lot of gigs here. He's also a musician, and he'll come here and do events. And so he was able to help get a little location for us to record today.
We're in a quiet back corner of the non-public area, but the staff, especially the brewers and brewing support staff, walk through here, and it's kind of past the normal business day, but they're like, wow, cool. There's a couple guys with headphones on back there.
Yeah.
What are they doing? They must have some kind of like group gaming thing going on.
Yeah.
Right?
That's funny. Like, oh, what's going on here? Yeah. But but it's just so insane to see like that. That's exactly another example of having to constantly reteach yourself and constantly learn and be a student in aviation of how are all these new rules going to affect your life in flying.
For sure. You brought up something in my mind that I want to mention is very early on in my aviation career, and my interest in aviation started as a civilian, and I had a few general aviation flights, not where I was in any kind of formal training, and then I kind of took the military route, and I went to the Air Force Academy, and I got to fly gliders while I was a cadet there, and I was totally hooked. I got a certified flight instructor. I'm out. Hell, when I go with nomenclature and.
Yeah, as opposed to CFI.
Yeah. And I was like 19 years old, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And things that there's this military battle and civilian interface that I was aware will be good for like my entire life at that point. And then graduated, went on to pilot training, flew a bunch of different kind of aircraft. I've flown military aircraft, everything from fighters to transports to trainers, and it's been just, that was a really rewarding part of my career. Went on to, it sounds like I'm getting into my resume.
No, that's good. Yeah, you should definitely talk about how you got into aviation, where the passion from it grew, and the experience that you've had on the way.
I eventually from about, well, including the academy years, that was like 4, so from 25 years of flying in the military aircraft, and literally 10 or 15 different kinds of aircraft. I went out and I retired from the Air Force at the absolute worst time in aviation history, or one of the worst times, in 2007. There's a big recession. And the first possible place I could go to and grab was the cargo airline world, which turned out to be really great. And I didn't know much about it other than it's kind of like what I was doing in the Air Force for a lot of the different airframes I flew. But the cargo or freight airline world is all about, since apart from the military, the civilian side of commercial side of freight mining is all about profit margin, making that bottom dollar. So everything was based on flying all night, lots of nights, never being home, and frankly, I was home a lot more while I was an Air Force pilot, which is pretty remarkable.
No kidding.
And so I hung in there with it for several years. I was a 747 captain for a cargo airline that kind of went bankrupt just as I was thinking about leaving. So that was kind of,
What was the name of it?
well, that's not important.
That's not important. That's not important. Yeah.
Well, suffice
Details.
to say, they did get bought out, and their company that acquired them is surviving and doing quite well.
Yeah.
But it was really it was a great experience. I don't regret any minute or flight hour of it. I'm just I just noticed that there were huge differences and the same type and reason of flying in the military versus civilian world. The one biggest difference was hey, we're doing this to get the max profit we can versus we're doing this to be in defense of the U.S. And I much preferred the latter, the defense thing, and although the pay was theoretically better on the civilian side, and I do think that with most companies that can stand the test of not going bankrupt and getting bought out are definitely well positioned to allow the civilian pilot in the business world, the commercial world, to do quite well. That wasn't the same route that I took, but 90% of my friends who I flew with in the military who decided to continue to fly are still actively flying in commercial carriers. A lot of them legacy carriers, Delta, United, American, certainly a lot of Southwest friends, and then a few legacy freightliners, I would say, like FedEx, GPS, and they're all doing fine. And so at my age, they cracked the code. They figured out how to make that post-military flying career work, and now they're kind of faced with, there's still this age 65 rule that the FAA has.
And they're pushing it now.
They are. I hear it might go to 67, which is, I think, a great idea. Let's make it more science-based, medicine-based, still just arbitrary, number. But these guys and gals, they're doing a great job out there, and they're enjoying the chapter 2 of their career. And now they're kind of coming back and starting to talk to me about, hey, well, what's this general aviation stuff like? And how do I go back and get my CFI, stuff? And I tell them, everything that I did, because when I left, Company X and went more to the non-flying business sector to kind of finish to be able to, retire. I also, on the side, took advantage of my GI Bill for serving in the military and years, and then I worked on checking off the right squares to get additional CFI ratings. Which I did the glider CFI, when I was a teenager, and then didn't really do anything with FAA. Oh, I had private single engine plane as well on the side and Aero Club out there at the academy. But I did nothing more with general aviation or civilian aviation until I retired from the Air Force, and then I went back and I'm like, hey guys, like to see how it's like coming back. And I'll tell you what, it was brutal, man. It was brutal because you don't know how tough it is to work, at the grassroots level until you have to go there, back there from the stratosphere, literally from the stratosphere. Military pilot, file, IFR, instrument flight rules, just you're always flying above all the general aviation, recreation, traffic, and suddenly you have to actually not just know the rules, but you have to depend on understanding them so you don't get squashed. Right?
Yes.
So really an amazing journey, much later in aviation life, but one that I just keenly respect everybody that's out there working it from day one, ground level as a civilian. and without that whole Uncle Sam, subsidy, right? There's nothing like getting paid to fly, but when you have to pay so that you can fly, that's a huge 180 that, unless you're super committed, you're probably not going to take on. But it's so worth it. I did a lot of, as well as getting a little bit of VA help, I did a lot of shelling out, to really see this general aviation, civilian aviation side, more thoroughly. But I'm absolutely got a lot more to learn. It's a different world. It's a much more hardworking world in a lot of ways. But it's something that I highly recommend to anybody. You can absolutely do it nowadays, whereas when I was growing up, there are plenty of opportunities to fly for the airlines, but you really pretty much had to go through the military
to get the hours.
Those squares to get, to be
or they
viable,
preferred
right?
they preferred military, right? Yeah.
So nowadays it's like, oh man, it's like just all hands on deck. If you are a pilot in anything, or you're a student pilot in anything, or you want to be a pilot, it's like the commercial aviation world, the corporate and larger commercial aviation world wants you. So I think it's a great time to be exploring those opportunities. And if you don't want to go to the military, you really don't have to at this point. It's still a great way to go, in my opinion, but you don't have to. So that's a large nutshell of what I've been up to.
Yeah. Well, I like how you talk a little bit about the transition from going military to going to business. And I know that when you go to business, it is exactly profit. And like, imagine this, like, it gets even worse when you're on the maintenance side of things, because it's like, the longer the airplane sits on the ground, the more money that we're losing. So we're getting, as a mechanic point of view, you're getting less time, you're getting stress on a very important job that you have to do to keep the plane airworthy. And a lot of people that might be in a manager position have no aviation maintenance background whatsoever. They come in fresh out of school, or from a different business background, but they don't understand the meat and potatoes of what's going on. And so I definitely understand and feel you on that, because I've had other people and heard it and experienced it a little bit as well. Not to a degree of like, oh my gosh, but I've definitely heard it from a lot of friends where it's like, this is intense, and it is about getting stuff done on time, and it's like, well, you have this much amount of time to get it done, so maybe quality might go down in some aspects, right?
I love what you just said. Like, playing on the ground equals zero income.
Yes.
Right?
You're losing money. Yeah.
For anybody, right? Yeah. Right. Losing money because you're still shelling out money for that plane, for that insurance, for that upkeep. And if current events, are anything to play, and they certainly are. Look at Boeing. Look at the big guys.
And they're suffering now for it.
We have a problem. It was literally just late this afternoon I saw that now it's not just the MAX 9 with the door plug bolt issue that Boeing and their subsidiary fuselage supplier are under the microscope for, but now it's like, hey, guess what? Since we're all descending on these Boeing airplanes at their individual carriers, and we're looking from a maintenance angle at like deep inspections of all these systems, it turns out just this afternoon, and I hope I get this overview right. There are MAX 8 and MAX 9 bolt issues in the rudder assembly, internal to the rudder, and there's like at least one instance of I forget how they put it. It was humorous if it wasn't, that, and thank goodness it didn't lead to any accidents. But there was a non-fixed bolt in the rudder compartment of a 737 MAX. I don't remember which model, but certainly there's all kinds of inspections, and I think this is probably the tip of the iceberg, and I'm sure we're going to see more about the scrutiny and it. Pilots have obviously a lot to do with getting the plane safely from A to B, but really, in large part, pilots, while they are absolutely called upon to come to the rescue if something's not going right, in particular with a flight, the systems themselves need to perform the way they're intended to, and if they go catastrophically wrong, that's one of the big reasons the pilots are there. However, if things are not mechanically going right as they were designed to go right, then there are unfortunately sometimes where even the pilots cannot rescue the situation, right? So, and I believe this is indicative of that potential scenario where it's like, well, you're supposed to have the plane constructed properly and maintained so that it retains that construction. And so that's why it's super critical, beyond just a pilot shortage, it's super critical that we have maintenance personnel that are going to be able to carry the load of that. That's the first point of defense for keeping the flying public safe.
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, it's all about, like, the word that I see in my head right now, like, it's preventative maintenance, right? Like, that's a really big word that right now is, like, flashing in red in my mind. And as a mechanic, that is exactly what you do. You're preventing certain situations that could go down, because exactly, a pilot is supposed to be able to work an issue once you're on the air, but supposing that the majority of the airplane is okay.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like
there's only so much you can do,
sure.
right?
So as a pilot, I would say, look, we have procedures. We have, the Navy calls them ATOPS. The Air Force calls them Dash 1 procedures. The civilian world just calls it operating procedures, and we refer to several different documents about systems that, if they are available and working correctly, and call it a minimum equipment list. If the MAL says you can fly with this, you can fly with this, well, that means we're dependent on that thing to be working.
Yeah.
And it's only going to work correctly if it's been maintained correctly, and it's been checked correctly and inspected correctly. So, first officer on a carrier that flies either of those 737 molecules mentioned, that's that person's job to do a walk around. Well, they're checking the rudder, but what they're checking is, a very basic visual external. Is it free and clear of foreign objects? Is it bent, or is there something funky going on with it? Well, you would never know that there's a bolt loose inside the thing by doing a walk around. And that's all that is accomplished between flights on any given day. And I don't know how often maintainers are looking inside, pulling out a little panel and scoping or whatever the interior of a flight control. And I would assume it's not very often, because that's not cost effective. But it all starts with that original proper application of wattage, bolts, nuts, etc. to a certain specification, right?
Yeah.
And that's entirely the realm of the maintainers. So we're obviously all concerned that things perhaps have been overlooked, and I would certainly hope that nobody wants to just kind of blow off their responsibility, and I don't think that's the case at all.
Yeah.
What has happened is it's where there's a handoff,
Yeah.
With the door plug thing, it was because the subsidiary, delivered the fuselage to Boeing. Boeing had a lot of stuff they were doing. Whether or not there was any kind of actual written procedure for them to follow for that handoff for inspection, I don't know. But certainly there's more to follow than that. But it absolutely comes full circle to, look, if you're going to be in aviation maintenance, you need to really have the mind, and I tell you this as a pilot, okay? You need to have the mindset that you are the final authority on whether that plane is going to properly serve the needs of these people, or if it's going to lead to some kind of incident or worse with those people that get on board that aircraft. So what I do appreciate is every maintainer I've ever met takes that to heart, and it's a very serious business. And like I said, everyone I've ever talked with takes that very seriously, and we just need to shore up things that happen in transit, things that happen with when more than one company is involved, I think, especially. But by all means, if anybody's thinking of getting into aviation, please make sure that you're getting into it because you want to further the industry, and even more importantly than that, you want to make sure that you are protecting people's lives, right, and property. So
yeah, protect was a word that came up in my head as you were speaking, and as you're speaking as well, I see aviation as, and this is something that I wanted to talk and actually say to you personally too. So I'm happy I'm kind of getting towards that. When I was in Boy Scouts, and you were still in the time where I was in Boy Scouts, I had a lot of people that I looked up to, and I would consider them mentors, including you, whether you knew that or not, you know. but I would look at people and say, like, they have a way of thinking that I want, and I need to be like a good functioning person in society, and to be able to give back. There's tools in your mind that are at any disposal to you when you need, and aviation has really helped me be able to hone those. And a good example is, as you're speaking the story of how the problem with the screw going on, or the bolt in the Max 9, I automatically in my head I'm like, okay, well, in aviation, there's more than one reason as to something goes wrong. Whenever something goes wrong, and they teach you this in school, it's because it's more than two things, or it could be two or more things that happen that compile up, and then a mistake happens. It's never just for one reason and then it happens.
Exactly, and that's a key aviation safety kind of mantra.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a chain of events.
Yeah, and you learn that as a pilot too. Yeah,
right. And so the chain of events from pilot related activities and actually flying are either going to lead to or mitigate an accident. Right? Mm-hmm. So you think in the maintenance world is, I think what you're telling me, which makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, like going into it is exactly that. I wanted to find these tiny little like nuggets of like life advice that I felt like I needed as someone to be able to grow and like in Boy Scouts, because that's another way how we know each other. He was on my board of review. Mr. Kraft was on my board of review for my Eagle. And it's about being able to be a good person yourself to give back to your society, but you have to be able to build yourself. And knowing these small things, like in aviation, I'll go to the pilot side. It's am I fit? Like there's illness, am I ill, medication, safe. Right? I am safe. Yes, I am safe. That's exactly what I was going. Like stress, it's like there's these tiny things that it's like it doesn't just apply to aviation. It applies to, and I've noticed it's applied to everything that I do in my life. And okay, well, even in Boy Scouts too, it's like be prepared. And then in aviation, it's the exact same thing. It's like, okay, well, you're gonna have lives at risk when every time you go up, you have to land no matter what. Okay, so how do you plan for that? Okay, well, let's look at the weight. Let's look at the weather, and weather is always constantly changing. And then what happens if X, Y, and Z don't work? You have an alternate plan. You have alternate airports. That's how someone in life, and those tools that you have are just so important and can reciprocate in all these other different aspects in life where maybe you feel lost, but it's like, okay, I have these bases where it's like, okay, I have a plan. What are my alternate airports, right? And it doesn't have to be, and airports in this sense is a metaphorical airport, right?
That's great.
Yeah.
It's life is all about latching onto analogies and figuring out what works for our situation we're currently in. And aviation, to me, and to you, what you just agreeing as well, is it lends itself, aviation lends itself to us grasping the physical realities of aviation and how important it is to do things right in aviation, because our lives literally depend on it, and the lives of others literally depend on it. It's a very powerful analogy to other things that we do in life, and where maybe it's not life and death, but it's like, well, it's just I can get through my day better, and that's fine. I think to transfer that. I really like what you brought up about the whole, well, let's figure out how to do the right thing whenever possible, to consider all the alternatives, to figure out how to make the right decision, and checking the weather. It doesn't always have to be checking the weather if we're doing something on the ground somewhere, but you're checking out something. You're considering alternatives, alternates, as we say in the nation. It's super important to do those basic things that we as both maintainers and pilots will always do, which is, all right, what is the task before us? What needs to work correctly? What do we need to check out? What kind of info do we need to gather? Is that info we gathered matching up with what is necessary? Yes, then we do this. No, you do this other thing. When you're in the business of doing that as a maintainer or a pilot, you get very familiar and you embrace that style of doing things, and transfers, I think, beautifully into anything else you do with your life. It's like, okay, the risk level might be different, but just, all right, there's a problem. There's a problem with whatever other job I'm doing outside of admission. Okay, well, what's the problem? Okay, well, let me get all the facts, and then what should we do to correct this thing that is due to facts not correct? Okay, and then check back and see if we've succeeded. In aviation, it's a lot. That part's a lot easier. It's like, oh, we landed safely. Okay, that's how you check back.
But you also, exactly what you're saying, we have a review afterwards, how the flight went and what could have gone better.
Well, right, certainly. Yeah. And actually, the civilian world, that's very true. Just like the military, it was in the military. And I'm sure the maintenance world as well, you're going to go back and look at everything on paper, because everything is recorded with maintenance. You're going to review which what was done, was done properly. Where are all your tools, right? When you're a maintainer,
and it's like if they're shadow boxed, they're shadowed.
Is going to be accounted for, and it's not. There's going to be a little problem.
Everyone, especially in the military, everything stops, is what I heard.
I wish I could afford to have a toolbox that has those cutouts for every tool.
Oh, they're nice. Yeah.
But it's to me, it is really good that, and then I'll fly 24/7. Sometimes I wish I could, but certainly everything I do in life, if I let it and I think about it, and think a little bit about aviation rules and what it means with that high risk environment that aviation is, to doing things the right way and doing them in a certain order, and it just works for anything. So I'm really glad that you noticed that analogy. I don't know. I don't do, I'm not currently in aviation as a living necessarily. I'm more on the recreational hobby side, but I do maintain all my seafighter ratings and that. And I really, I think it's very important that we keep a professional cadre of people that are as knowledgeable as possible in the maintenance side and the pilot operator side, and pass them on. I don't want to have a hiccup in the timeline, which I was kind of afraid that COVID might have something to do with, right? Because I know I kind of stopped flying in COVID and general aviation, but certainly we needed to make sure that even those who take our advice are absolutely on board with keeping it safe, being knowledgeable, doing all those disciplines that you just described, that we can carry on to every other aspect of our lives. That's super important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the reason why I started aviation, because I saw that in you, and I saw that in Mr. Lehman, and I saw that in Mr. Welsh, and I was like, how do they have what they have? You know, like, like how are they able to solve the problems or think the way that they do, right? And I can understand now, you know, briefly, because I'm young, right? I'm naive, but you know, in aviation, I'm able to understand more like little rules or different disciplines, like you were saying, and be able to translate that into all other aspects in your life as well. So that to me, it was like, it was really important to me. Yeah.
Well, like I said, while you're young, I would also say, adding on to while you're young, I'd say I am on my way, because I like that. That's a phrase that indicates that I am looking toward the future, and I am trying to absorb things from the past that others have learned, and trying to make sure that that I can build on that, you know, to be, because none of us in the past have got it right every time, and it's super important to remember all that so that you can keep getting it better, safer. With aviation overall, maintenance operations has never been safer, even with these very news boutique-y, if you will, headlines. Aviation has never been safer in the history of flight than it is right now, this year, today. So, and it's because of us building on the knowledge of those that came before, and the mistakes we made, and the things we've learned. So that's the way we work it. That's the way we get to enjoy aviation and stay safe.
Yeah, well, I think that's why it makes the headlines, because like car crashes don't make headlines, right? But it happens all the time. Aviation, it almost never happens. So when there's something that goes on, yeah, it is news. But like I said, or like what you were saying, it's really cool that our industry really prioritizes safety, especially in a political point of view, where we do, as opposed to maybe look at a more political side of things, it is more like, let's get experts in, let's get pilots in, let's get mechanics in. We need their feedback in order to implement these new maybe regulations that we're going to add. And I think in that industry, I talked to someone else that in the medical industry, it's a little bit different. You know, it is more like we were saying, like maybe like more like profit or something like that. And, you know, while of course that does show it in some aspects in aviation as well, or politics, right? We are one of, me being naive, I think aviation is one of those aspects where it's like, we're at the closest place where we can say we almost have it right, you know, or we're trying to do the right thing.
I think it's it's definitely one of those professions, you know, like medicine. It's one of those professions where, or any first responder kind of profession. It's one of those professions where you have to be properly skilled, properly trained, properly cognizant, and able to respond in an instant to maintain and save lives. I mean, that's really what it's about, right? It's and I think that's why it's one of the few endeavors in human workforce where it's literally like that. And you got medicine, you got first responders, you got pilots, and maintainers, anything aviation. There isn't much room for error before it rears its ugly head and somebody is at least getting hurt, if not worse, right? So yeah, it's and it doesn't have to be scary. Again, if we're learning from the past and we understand, we're confident it's safer uptake all the time, but it does take that constant vigilance, that constant, oh yeah, do I really have to check this again? Yes.
Yeah.
Check it again. I mean, because that's sort of a dichotomy, right? It's like, well, you know, everything's so safe. It doesn't matter if I do my little thing right this moment. That's why it keeps getting safer, because it does.
Yeah, and you do implement it. You do it. You continue to do it.
from whatever that tolerance is on a bolt, a certain rivet,
to walking around the airplane too, and actually checking everything,
Absolutely, it's fun while being extremely serious, if that's possible. Right?
Yeah,
It's two things in one.
Well, I think that's like that's what I like about aviation. Well, it's like you know that there's an inherent risk, right? But once you get there, it's a hell of a time, Yeah, it can be. Yeah. Yeah, and it's fun and like exactly that model what you're saying in aviation is one that I hope that many other industries are able to apply. And of course, we're not perfect, right? But it's just, I think we try to do the right thing for the majority of the times. Yeah, because we have the underlying issue of safety. Yeah, that everything else encompasses that. Yeah, you learn that. Yeah, you learn that. I have a question, just because I'm curious, and yeah, I'm excited to hear your answer. You're very you definitely have a big portion of your life now that you're mostly retired, or you're taking the chill life. You want to give back to youth, and I see that in like coming and doing a podcast with me, or being very active in scouting while I was in the program and I was around, and as well as being a substitute teacher in school. I want to ask, where does that come from, and what do you hope to be able to, like, is there a reason why you want to leave something in younger audiences that they understand based on maybe your example, like for example how that helped me, your example, or is there a message, or I'm just curious to see.
Yeah, sure. No, I think I understand what you're asking, and I mean, I haven't formulated it in kind of layers like this, but I'll try. When I joined the military, it was because I wanted to fly airplanes, and that was I'll just frankly say, that was kind of selfish, And I was like, I just want to be able to fly airplanes. I want it to be the best experience. I don't want to have to pay money for it. I just want to get the best training and et cetera. And so I kind of endured a lot of, military stressors in order to do that.
Military what?
Stressors, like, getting basic training, done, right? And beyond, and a lot of regiment, like strict, discipline and effect, right? Day in, day out, 24/7, and maybe I wasn't totally into that, but I grew to understand that that comes with the territory, and there are a lot of things about being disciplined and be regimented and be strict that apply to the thing that I really was passionate about, which was flying planes. Aviation is all about those things I just mentioned. And after time, I was like, okay, I'm comfortable with this lifestyle. I'll stay in the military, for a kind of a longer time than just a quick hop in and get out, the airlines, even though we might have all that kind of think it's much certainty. And so over time, I realized, there is so much with this military flying and flying in general, and the importance of working with a team, that is working with crew, including the maintainer, that I was fascinated with, I was enamored with, and I ended up over time liking it to, like, almost like being on a team, like a sports team. You know what I mean? And we all, most of us love to watch some kind of sport that stretch our fancy. We just had the Super Bowl last weekend.
Yeah.
And it's like, seemed like everybody tuned into that. Interesting aerospace fact, Super Bowl had the highest viewership in decades, only outdone by the Apollo 11 moon landing.
Oh, no
in
kidding.
1960.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think that kind of speaks to, well, we like to see this team thing, this struggle, this overcoming obstacles, this, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
I was, like I said, I was enamored with that. I really appreciate it. I just like the physical nature of flying as well. I mean, still my own little selfish indulgence. But beyond all that, as I grew through flying, and then I retired from the Air Force, and I tried the civilian world on the big scale, and I was like, yeah, this is cool and all, and I really appreciated flying the 747. It was truly a wonderful large aircraft to fly. One of my favorites, definitely ever. I had to say, as I walked away from all that, I just in my kind of later half of my years, I wanted to kind of make sure that the stuff that I enjoyed on a input level, on me receiving, was something that I took and embraced to help me understand how to kind of do the output level. And that's where I am now. I think it's really important, for me anyway, to figure out how to, give back is a pretty easy kind of phrase, and that's true. But more to the point, I want to make sure that, and I talk with my wife about this a good amount too, I want to make sure that we are, and she's a very recently retired elementary school teacher, just down the freeway in another town. I think we both are on point with this with our friends. Like we have embraced the idea that we want to keep it cold. We want to train our replacements. We want to make sure that as human beings, we have other people that are kind of experiencing and feeling what it's like to be responsible, what it's like to be polite, what it's like to be a member of a team, what it's like to be respectful of one another. And that's, you brought up the scouting thing too. And I think that's super important. It doesn't have to be that particular organization. It's just anywhere where you are a member of a group of people that are like into learning from one another, respecting one another, understanding you'll have differences, learning from those differences, teaching new skills to one another.
The values too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Values, skills and values. I just think, and that's kind of like, that's been my undertone kind of motto lately. It's like, substantive teaching, it's like, it's just kind of a little, kind of job that like people don't really think about. Like, it's not, there's no glamour in that. That's cool. I'm not into that. At this point in my life, maybe when I was initial Air Force pilot training graduate, I was into glamour, but I think the transition's been good and appropriate for the decades. It's so much more important to me that I get to see the response, the reaction of kids, where they're like, "Oh, you're telling me something to think about, and I'm actually thinking about it." It doesn't matter what it is necessarily, but there's lots of scenarios, I could throw out there, but that's not important. The thing is the values, like you just mentioned, the value of team, the value of commitment, the value of hard work, that all these things that you mentioned that, scouting happens to, and also everything that comes full circle to how we work hard to do what we want to as our own passion for, you could call it selfish reasons, whatever, for ourselves initially. Turns out those tools that we acquired are actually, they work great to also tool things for future generation, for our replacements, like I said. So, I think acquiring the tools necessary to make ourselves better, but then as we age and move on, and we have kids and the kids grow and whatever, it's really important to keep those tools in mind and then use those same kind of tools, experience, communication, interpersonal relationships too, to make sure that our replacements are getting a fair shake at where they want to go. Like we talked about before this podcast, make sure they got the right vector.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Make sure they're aligned properly. Yeah, they're staying on course. Yeah. What I feel like I heard from you is you growing up, you've had all these like freedoms and things that you loved doing, and you learned a lot of experience along the way, and you want to make sure that those things that you were able to experience, other people are going to be able to experience. And in order to experience those, right, you might need to have the right tools in your kit, right?
Yeah, that is exactly what it's about. You want to have goals in mind, and then you have to figure out what tools you need, how to get them. And, obviously we're not going to do it in a vacuum. We're going to depend on those that came before us. And so it's a wise young person who can seek out those that have those tools. And I think it's a wise older person who can figure out how to present those tools back. And like I said, in our replacements. And I think that's it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you also learn something new when you're teaching something back.
Absolutely.
And especially when it might be for someone younger, right? Like when I was teaching like young tenderfoots, right, or how to do something new in scouting, right? I learned something along the way too. What are some things that you would say that you've learned while also wanting to teach and give back as well?
Well, for the longest time, the joke around the Air Force was, in the pilot world was, if you can't do, teach.
That's right.
If you can't teach, evaluate. And that's not really true, but it was always a tongue-in-cheek. A fun reference to the idea that, look, the rubber meets the road when you're actually actively teaching someone, when you are mentoring. And the behind-the-scenes actual thing that was occurring in flying, and then turns out in the rest of real life, is when you're teaching, you're always learning. You're absolutely always learning. And I find that true when I'm just substitute teaching. It's like I learn something new every day. And it's not always just about the subject matter. It's really about like human beings, how they're interacting, what's important to help motivate people. How do I stay motivated? There's always something going on that I learn about every day. And I think that's what keeps me going, actually, is that's why I love the job that I do right now. And I still love aviation. I love teaching in the aviation world because I'll learn something myself, not just because I'm going from one airframe to another, or one student level to another, but just because students come with new things about themselves that speak to how they can learn. And I'm like, oh, wait, okay, mental note. Maybe I should try and teach this another adjusted way next time because of how I see they are reacting. And things fluctuate through generations too. So you gotta stay on your toes. But it's not a labor. It's a thankful, kind of adjustment, right? So otherwise we just feel like we're languishing and we're not. We're not growing. So
yeah. I definitely feel that, where you feel you're keeping the lights on, you're constantly wanting to grow and constantly wanting to learn and exactly. And by teaching, you still are growing and you still are learning.
And just by the fact that if you set an example as a teacher, and I'll do the quote signs here, even though I can see them. As a teacher, you're also a student. At least that's how I feel. And so when your actual students in a formal setting can see or feel that you as a teacher are still learning, I don't think that's a bad confession at all. I think that should be a point of inspiration, right? So, that not only as a student are you taking on the whatever technical skills, physical skills, from your teacher, you're kind of learning that it's okay that as you start to get the torch passed and you're a teacher, it's okay for you to keep learning while you're teaching too. And I think if you're a teacher that is just output, teaching, you might not inspire future people to want to teach because that's not very fun, right? That's not very challenging. It's not inspirational, right, to yourself. So yeah, I love it when and making mistakes is a huge banner for that. It's an advertisement. No teacher is perfect, and if teachers want to pretend like they're perfect, I guess that's okay. But that's not very inspirational, right? So I would recommend. We're getting way off of aviation now.
No, like I said, the podcast covers a lot.
But it does work back in the aviation world too. If you are teaching aircraft maintenance, if you are teaching pilot operations, if you are teaching dispatch, anything that I've been intimately involved with, aviation, far more important to get the people to come after you motivated to explore, understand that that learning never stops, that it's always super important to stay curious, super important to curiosity also is like check into things, right? Like double check. And again, we're back to maintenance, right?
Yeah.
Don't just let things pass you by, because you can let things pass you by. It could be
or stay in front of the plane, right? Be in the pilot. Exactly, yeah, it would be in the pilot world.
So, and that's where I think the aviation world overall is just one of the most dynamic of any possible envelopes of employment to be in. Whether it be maintaining, operating, supporting. It's just really, it keeps you on your toes, and it should. And if you don't like being on your toes, get into something else, because you depend on yourself, and everybody else around you depends on you too. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's a team. Yeah.
Huge part.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you, what's something that you wanted younger generations to really get and understand, and maybe you could repeat it, but I think you said a lot of those things earlier, like staying curious.
Yeah, I was going to read that right back to you. So stay curious. Don't. I would say, I'll try to stay positive.
Well, whatever you see, I think it's important, whether.
But trust in the idea that trust is something to be built. Don't just trust the first thing you hear or read or scroll through, right? Just don't. Trust is earned. Trust is, like I said, it's a growth process. And I'm referring probably obviously about, our cyber society, our internet-based society. It's very tempting to take shortcuts and just go, well, I just read about this or heard this or saw this or whatever on my phone. And that's true. And I'm going to go adjust my life based on that. Don't do that. With the advent of, not the advent, but with the flourishing of AI, it's getting easier and easier for non-human initiation to affect how we carry on our lives on a daily basis. That's kind of outrageous when you think about it. So just make sure that make sure that as a human being on this planet, you are always curious, and always, and therefore always questioning, skeptical, whatever you want to call it. People sometimes say skeptical is negative. I say it's simply helpful to make sure you're going to do the next thing.
Another thing in maintenance is trust but verify.
Oh yeah, that's a huge. If I recall correctly, I was going to mention that earlier, but I didn't know about what your audience was all about, and I don't like to get political, but and I won't. I was simply saying.
You could say whatever.
Trust but verify was a classic quote from President Ronald Reagan in the Cold War, and he was all about, we want to trust the other side of the Cold War, the Soviet Union at that point. But we also need to verify, and that's why he was adamant about supporting launching an initiative to get this strategic arms limitation.
I didn't know that's where it came from. Yeah. I just knew it from the aviation, side of things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. Great. But back to your point, it's like it's so important to not just take the first thing you read about or the most convenient thing you read about, see about hear about at face value. Just you kind of gotta fight to understand what might be going on behind those alleged facts. You just have to, and everybody has to kind of become a detective, judge, jury member, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, it takes some energy, and therefore maybe if you don't have the energy, just don't. Then turn off all your inputs. Don't try to look at the news inputs because it's not probably going to be news. So either be ready for it as a kind of a bit of a job, as a bit of a fight to discern what's the actual truth out of things, or don't participate.
Yeah.
I don't know. The latter doesn't sound like a good way to go through life. So you just kind of, everybody got to get up, better get their news filter fitness on, right? So taking care of your body, you take care of your mind that way.
Yeah,
that's it.
Well, in Boy Scouts, right? Physically strong, mentally.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah,
Always fit.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I love how you bring up some of those because I do find that over time when I'm a little troubled about I don't feel like this is working for me as an adult trying to convey something else, especially in the teaching role as a substitute teacher. Like I'm missing the mark. I'm not sure why. I'll go back to that scouting kind of those kind of list of values. I'll pick out, okay, maybe that's why it's not working. You know what I mean? And just kind of retool, try again the next day, figure out how to communicate better, how to get through to, with somebody who is having some trouble, appreciate those kind of challenges. Anyway, once again, off aviation topic, but I'm sure we can bring it full circle.
Another topic is personal growth, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not of a healthy mindset and not emotionally healthy, then you really it's not good to be actively involved on that day in any kind of aviation activity because it's very important to be able to be clear-headed, perform everything to the standard, whether that be a specific checklist, this procedure, you name it. That's just how it is. You just have to have your whole house in order, from a very Zen kind of way in order to do this, beyond level stuff in aviation. It's just, the foundation's super important.
Yeah. Well, it like it is in anything, and definitely from what I've seen growing up, I'm extremely lucky to have been able to grow up and be able to have a background where it teaches you these values in scouting, right? And teaching you these mental toolkits and aviation that I've been able to, adhere to and apply and like you were saying, always be curious, always wanting to learn. And what you were saying is, the trust but verify, but also be open-minded to an idea, because it's okay to have someone talk, but you can't just close out their idea. Exactly what you were saying. You have to be able to do that own research to be able to see, okay, well, where does my point of view stand based on what this person said, and how much do I believe in this belief based on the more research that I've done, right? Because maybe their point of view is right, or maybe if you inherently believe it's not right, but you've been open-minded to listen to it and question your own, I think that's where the growth comes in, and will even solidify your pre-existing notion or idea that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just we learn from our mistakes. We learn from the mistakes of others, and that's prime in aviation.
Yeah.
And we have to be full disclosure about all of that. There's no room for like cover up. There's no room for niceties sometimes, I guess. And that can be troublesome for some in the aviation world. On any angle of it, it's you don't want to cast a bad eye on somebody themselves personally, but you have to also bring to light that there was something that went wrong, and sometimes there are definitely human beings that were part of the cause of why that went wrong, and it's more about the thing that went wrong, not about the person that caused that thing to go wrong, right? It's absolutely, because again, there's always a positive that comes out of it, although some negative aspect might have occurred because of it. There's always a positive because we have learned, and that's super important. We'll get to the bottom of the procedural problem, the process problem. And yes, of course, people themselves need to be held accountable, but the more important thing to the aviation industry is that we learn from it and correct the process where it wasn't abundantly clear or wasn't easily enough funneled, or you name it, right? It's aviation is it's not designed to be eat your young kind of thing, right? It's more about the let's all work together and learn for one another, and we're all human beings. We're all going to make mistakes. We all want to go to work each day minimizing our mistakes so that we don't cause or are not part of a chain of events comes in.
Or recognizing.
Right. Being aware, right. Again, back to your stay curious thing, super important in all of life, but especially aviation. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's been great. I think everything, I'm sure there's so much more to talk about, but I like how we're able to cover a lot about aviation, which I've really wanted to talk about for a long time. And I guess coming back and talking to you really brings back, how I came to be on the path that, I guess I'm starting and I'm figuring out of what's going on as I continue on, right? But definitely the values and being able to just apply these different things that you learn from people. And again, we're saying staying open-minded and all these different analogies that we gained from aviation have definitely stuck to me. And I try, and in scouting too, I try really to stick to them, and I'm really thankful that you're also sharing these ideas that and values, not just to me, but also in subbing as well, or in your scouting career as well, and mentoring a lot of people. So I really want to thank you for that.
I appreciate that. I'm really glad to see that you represent the younger generation that is, taking the bull by the horns. You are doing whatever it takes, which includes like moving across our continent to try to experience all these different aspects of growth in aviation and just in life in general. And I think a lot of your foundation in scouting, because you brought it up several times, will really help to launch you on that journey. And it's not going to fail you because you still have faith in those values and that early experience in your life. And that's perfect. And I would say, not just you, but anybody else who is on the younger side of things, still looking for what they're going to do next, just, this has gone a little long on this podcast, but if you can stay curious, if you can really remember that it's, no matter what you do, it's important to do it well, that no matter what you are doing well, eventually it's going to lead to people being able to succeed or face peril. Aviation is the pinnacle of that to me. Take what you are learning seriously, take how you approach it and grow into seriously. Don't discount the importance of being on a team and learning from others and those that came before you. Those I think that's the recipe. I really do. And what's the ultimate goal? I don't know. To me, as I get older, it's to, like I said, train our replacements. Try to make sure that they have a notion that this might be important, and certainly for themselves, but also for those who are coming after. And full circle, aviation's not going away. How we do aviation might be changing in small part or large part over the years and decades coming up, but it's always going to be dependent on people being very highly skilled, people being skeptical, scrutinous, curious, people having the right kind of values, the right kind of drive, people who want to help others on a team. I mean, to me, that's it. And I love how you were able to kind of weave the scouting values you grew up with to the aviation acumen that you're acquiring, and the sense of adventure is strong. I hear it in all of your discussion, and that's of course refreshing, and that's where young adults should be. So take that adventure and start to, like you're doing, start to shape it into something, and keep a goal in mind. Fight for acquiring new skills and learning. We never stop learning, right? So, like I say, I'm still a student. My Instagram profile is literally, I think the first 2 words on my IG is like educator, period, student, period. That's literally what I have on it, right? And then maybe somewhere buried in it's like pilot.
You have to, you have to put it out.
Those are the 2 far more important things to me. Far more important. Learning from others, teaching others, no matter what phase you're in growing your career. So it's been a real pleasure speaking with you tonight, Daniel. It's I really, really enjoyed coming by, and I'm looking forward to hearing how this goes for your future podcasts.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for what you're doing and giving back, and definitely being a part of my formation too. So
Absolutely. Best of luck to you and all of your followers.
Thank you. All right. This is From Ground to Great. Daniel Ruiz Menace with Mr. Kraft, signing out.